All right. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to our August version of Reverse Book Club. This month, we are diving into a book by Peter Thiel called Zero to One. And it is a book that was written actually off of a series of lectures that Peter Thiel did while he was moonlighting as a professor at Stanford. And so a lot of this came to be as he was sharing what he looks for in his investments. So if you don't know Peter Thiel, he was one of the founders and original members of PayPal, rather ubiquitous payment system that we all know and love. He actually founded that company. Sorry, my computer froze for a second. He actually founded that company with Elon Musk, Eric Schmidt, and a few other guys. And so if you are a technophile, you would know that there's this conversation about the PayPal mafia. So the guys who started PayPal and ultimately sold that off went on to be the founders of, through Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, through Peter Thiel. He's founded multiple startups and was the lead investor on Facebook. The guys who created YouTube, the guys who created Yelp, all were part of the original dozen people at PayPal. And so, and through the series of lectures, he offers up what he looks for in businesses that are set up to dominate the market. And if you're sitting here thinking, hey, why are we talking about big multi-billion-dollar, the largest companies in the world in the technology ecosystem? And I'm often reminded of Kanye West's infamous words that everything in the world is exactly the same. And I think that whether or not you believe that to be true, I think that there's a lot of benefit in looking outside of our specific discipline for frameworks and strategies and insights, and then bringing them back into what we're trying to do and what we intend to do with our real estate businesses. I think that when we do that, we might not find some sort of revolutionary or proprietary piece of information, but a slight adjustment to the way that we look at things could have us approach our business with a different vigor, or have us focus on a different set of priorities to grow faster. And so what I'm hopeful is that today's conversation is going to be one that will reframe some of the ways that we think about our business and reframe some of the approaches. So the first tenet in the book Zero to One is to always aim for monopoly, right? Monopolies are the strongest and most profitable businesses. And there is a very clever and oft quoted phrase from Peter Thiel in this book and in several of his lectures, and that is that competition is for losers. And we're going to explore that a little bit towards the end, and what exactly does he mean by that, and how does that relate to this concept of monopoly. But if you're unfamiliar with monopolies, they are dominant businesses in a marketplace that control a certain subset of the resources that make them extremely profitable and reduce some price sensitivity in the market and create a massive allocation of market share into one company or one individual. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, that is probably the opposite of most commonly held beliefs when we think about free markets and we think about the positivity of competition. And then I started thinking about real estate businesses as monopolies. So for anyone who's in a position to, if you want to unmute or just drop in the chat, what are some examples when you think of real estate monopolies that might exist from a business standpoint in our industry, in the residential real estate industry? The first one that jumped to mind for me was the idea of a geographic farm, right? And so when you look at specific markets, specific neighborhoods, specific communities, you see, there's a disproportionate amount of market share that might belong to one or two individuals. Or, if we were to zoom out and think about things globally, there are regional dominance of specific real estate brands, right? But zooming in, we'll keep this as much to the individual real estate agent level. The geographic farm is the most prominent version of monopoly, right? So if I sell all of the houses in a community, then I have the opportunity to continue to sell all of the houses in a community. We see some monopoly potential inside of subsets of the market, right? Whether it be the investor market or whether it be the maybe the luxury market, right? We talk a lot about that. Or we see agents building strong monopoly and brand around first-time home buyers, right? And these are things that if we control or we have access to the majority of the business inside of this subset, we can create a monopoly. And again, a monopoly just means that we are doing things at such a high level with such great efficiency that we are capturing more market share and driving substantial profitability. And then I think for any real estate agent, the monopoly that can be created over your sphere of influence and over your database is the one that should be the first and foremost focus in your business. The relationships and the advantage and the access that you have to the people in your sphere, right, is your pathway to creating monopoly, right? And so if everybody you knew only bought and sold with you and only referred to you, you have a substantial business right out of the gate, right? That is very hard to infiltrate, very hard to bust up. And there's no Sherman Antitrust Act from Teddy Roosevelt that's going to come in and break up your friendships and relationships to the extent that they're not going to do business with you. So as we proceed with the framework, let's think about, is it a sphere-based monopoly that we want to create, a sub-market-based monopoly, luxury investors, first-time home buyers, or a geographic farm-based monopoly, right? So when we think about just a quick step back and precursor on business, right? Our businesses create X dollars of value, and our goal is to capture Y% of that, right? So we have a business that sells $20 million a year in real estate or $5 million a year in real estate, and what flows all the way through to the bottom line for us is Y% from a profit margin standpoint. So said another way, we are looking to generate revenue and then preserve margin so that we can create more profitability. So one of the great examples they use in the book is when you look at the airline industry and Google, right? And they use this juxtaposition of like, which one would you rather go without? And most people would probably say that, hey, the airline industry is something that would be pretty hard to go without, right? Given all the commerce and transportation and logistics involved with it, even though Google's really great and we all use it about 100 times a day. And so if you apply the same strategy to being a market leader in this industry, or in one of these industries, which would you rather be? Well, the airline industry, just a few years ago when this book was published, was about a $200 billion industry, right? $200 billion, which is 4 times the size of Google, right? And so that's the X, right? So really big X. And I think about your real estate business. Oh my God, there's 5.85 million homes going to be sold this year, right? Big number. But the airline profit margin was 0.2%. So of that 200 billion, only about 400 million was profit. Google, on the other hand, with the 50 billion in revenue, had 21% profit, right? So, many multiples more. And the other piece of this, and why could it be that way for Google? And yes, there's the software component, and there's no physical, no physical assets that have to be worried about. Google, as a part of the search industry, it owns 66% of the market, right? And the total search industry is still not even, so do the math there. The total search industry is not even half of the airline industry, but Google owns 66% of it, versus the top 4 airlines that exist are less than 65% of the total airline industry, right? And so this is where the conversation around competition versus monopoly really starts to manifest itself. And so again, I want to make that a conversation about your real estate business, as we think about this idea that, okay, there's going to be 75,000 homes sold this year in Northeast Ohio, right? And we'll talk more about this momentarily, but this idea that if I just need to sell 0.001% of those homes, right, and I can make a living, is a very common fallacy, right? Big market, small share means profitability. That's the opposite of the direction that we want to be thinking, because if we're trying to compete on the sale of 75,000 homes, we will compete away all of our efficiency, all of our scalability, and all of our profit. However, if we're going to target specific populations, specific areas, or specific people, there is an economy of scale that can exist there. And so you would rather have a much larger percentage of a smaller market than a small percentage of a larger market. We'll talk more about why that is in just a minute, but let's talk first about, let's go through what do we mean by competition? Why is competition always so attractive? What do we mean by monopoly, and what is that? How is that really showing up? So competition is something that is always talked about, and we want to be creating environments that allow for healthy competition or fair competition. And from a there are certain subsets of the conversation where that is incredibly appropriate, and we want to be creating opportunities for people to be in the game. But from a business standpoint, right, and we're approaching this from, to put food on the table for our families, the monopoly is our goal, right, with our business. The reason that competition gets talked so much about is because it's, politically palatable, right? It smacks of fairness. You have this easy to model, right? Like econ professors love talking about competition and free markets, because it's very easy to model. And then it's very efficient in a static world, right? If nothing changes, everything from a competitive standpoint would look great. The problem is that we don't live in a static world. And the biggest problem with perfect competition is that you will compete away all of the value or all of the profitability of your company. Imagine if you had to compete with every real estate agent on every listing. At some point, somebody is just going to, and we're already seeing this in this crazy seller's market, take the percentage down, take the percentage down, take the percentage down, until all of the profitability, all of the potential for profit in the industry is run through, right? And we've seen this happen. It's actually, the airline industry is probably a great example, through all the consolidations, and then through everything that happened in the last 24 months. There's substantial government involvement coming for the airlines to keep them viable, and so they will be less profitable but more competitive and more ubiquitous. Versus creating a monopoly, the pros to a monopoly are the incentive is to innovate, right? To create something that no one else has or that no one else can do, right? And when we are able to create a monopoly, when we own a geographic farm, when you own a neighborhood, right, you are in a position where, there's long-term stability there, right? If there are 10 houses on a block and you've sold the buyers for 9 of them, right? And then when those 9 go to sell, you will have the opportunity to be the listing agent there, and it's your signs in the yard. And so when the 10th one sells, it would make sense for you to go there. And there's much more profitability in the equation from a monopolistic point of view, right? The challenges with monopolies is that they can be abused, right? And I think from the openness and access point of our industry is that you don't really see it being abused a lot. Like number one market share in a particular community isn't charging twice as much as a listing fee as anybody else that's showing up, right? The dominance is really in the access and the systemic relationships that exist there. So when you think about, and this was a big reframe for me, is you don't want to compete for business, right? You want to be able to go get the business when you want it, or more importantly, like the business comes to you when your services are needed. And it was a very interesting shift in the framework. And Peter Thiel talks a lot in the book about what is the fundamental truth that the majority of people believe that to be wrong. And his argument was that perfect competition is bad and monopolies are good from the sake of the business owner standpoint, right? We do not want to be going out looking for competition as business owners. And so how do we create monopoly? Or how do we put ourselves in a position to do it? I think the first thing to think about is, what are the intersections that are going to allow you to be to be innovative in some way, shape, or form, right? And he uses a great example I'll use here, is that being the something of somewhere doesn't always mean that you're not going to be a nobody of nowhere. And so the example would be, you can't just take 3 circles, find the overlap, create a Venn diagram and be like, yes, there's exclusivity and there's innovation in this business model. Because, if I told you I was going to open a restaurant and I was going to be the only high-end British food in Cleveland Heights, you would probably think, who eats British food? What is even British cuisine, right? And so there's not a there, right? And so this is probably the hardest, most creative, most the biggest brain exercise is really checking, as you think about your real estate business and as you think about who you are, the service you provide, the communities that you'll serve, the way that you'll do business, right? Is that overlap real, right? And it's not just grabbing the few things that your neighbors say about you, or the last 3 places that you sold homes, and saying that's it. We've got to be really intentional, and there's some great tools out there as you think about your business for analyzing the market as to where there isn't a dominant player. There's only one dominant player, which would spell opportunity. That's Trend Graphics, which everybody in the company has access to. But you create a monopoly by exploiting the real and unique intersections of circles. So one of yours is, one of us, for all of us, is going to be realtor, right? Because that is part of the unique value proposition, is that we are trained and licensed and capable of helping people sell their home or buy a home or invest in real estate, right? And then the other ones, again, they're going to come down to geography. They're going to come down to your sphere of influence. They're going to come down to the submarket that you want to exploit. And it may also come down to some other specific skill sets that you have. Gary Keller always says that teachers make the best realtors, right? And there's a few different reasons for that, but one of them is that they're educators, right? Trained educators, which for anybody who's buying a home, right, it is a process, whether they bought a home 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 50 years ago, the world's different, right? And so taking that educator spin, right, and walking somebody through the transaction, creating, learning opportunities for them is going to be an exclusive benefit there. And you guys might, if you guys might remember last October, we had during one of the sales meetings, we had a panel where Tom Seaman talked about, from a business development standpoint, he always has always believed that there's riches in the niches, right? There are riches in the niches. And it might be that, you have a background in contracting, or you have a background as a teacher, you have a background, with, as a deacon at your church, or whatever it is, right? But there's something that you were able to leverage to get to where you used to be. And as you come into real estate, it's a way to leverage that. Hey, I'm the only person that anybody buys, sells, or invests with. So a great exercise to go through is to figure out what you want your circles to be, and then make sure that your branding and your value proposition and your marketing and your prospecting are all driving right at the heart of that intersection, right? Because from the very beginning of the life cycle of a transaction, which is prospecting, we have to be very purposeful if we want to take a lot of market share in a specific subset of our ecosystem, right? Selling 10 homes in 10 different counties, or selling 10 homes in the same zip code, have very different long-term impacts on our business. So some great examples they use in the book, and just to support this sort of niche starting approach, is that the biggest companies in our universe right now did not start with trying to get a small piece of a big pie. Actually, the most common path to failure is small piece of a big pie. You can go back, I guess probably 10 years now, when there was the big green technology bust, Solandra, solar panel companies, electric companies, wind farms, all of that. Like, everyone was just trying to get a piece of what was meant to be an ever growing, a small piece of what was supposed to be an exploding industry. And ultimately a small piece of too small of a piece of any pie is not going to be enough to sustain. So when you look at these three, some of the largest companies in the world, Amazon just started with books, right? And this is the conversation on how do you build the monopoly, right? So Amazon just started with books, and they had all the books, and you could buy them all online. And then from there, they took a dominant position with books, and they moved into book adjacent things, journals, pens, rulers, school supplies, right? And they have just continued to build concentrically off of one dominant position, about 25 years ago in books. eBay, right, which is, one of the largest transaction platforms, the largest bazaar in history, is, something that started with, speaking of niche, like really weird niche products, right? The Pez dispensers and the obscure baseball cards and sports memorabilia, right? Not a universally palatable product, right? But a very fervent base, right? People who were highly committed to that, right? And then finally, Facebook, great example. They started, their initial market was 10,000 students at Harvard, right? And the very telling beginning for that, right, the very auspicious beginning was, they had 60% market share in 2 weeks, right? And so those things are encouragements to, in the early stages, or as you look at your business and you look for opportunities to grow, right? Let's say early stages, right? You want a big piece of a small pie, right? You'll often hear the conversation from around the office and throughout the Keller Williams, the Keller sphere is, you got to be number one at something, right? And then you can talk about that. And so, identify whatever it is for you. And I think that for anyone who feels like, hey man, I don't know what it would be, you have a sphere of influence, you have people that you're in relationship with, you have a database. If you can monopolize your database, If you can get that database up to about 500 individuals and monopolize it from a repeat and referral business standpoint, you are going to have one of the best businesses in the city. So don't start big and shrink, right? Start small and expand. So if you already have, a dominant position, maybe it's in your database, maybe it's in a geographic area, maybe it's, maybe I'm dominating with investors, after a period of time, maybe it is the first time home buyer, mid price point, and then you can take that market, or you take a subset of that market. But the key is that it's easier to dominate a small market than a large one, right? Let's say that we're going to sell 75,000 homes in Northeast Ohio, right? We're going to sell 75,000 homes in 2021 in Northeast Ohio. The number one agent in all of Northeast Ohio, or team for that matter, is going to sell about 750 homes, right? So they're going to have 1% of market share. That is far from dominant, right? So it is very hard to dominate a big market, right? But if you zero in and you say, I want to be the number one person in this part of Cleveland Heights, or I want to be this in Shaker Heights, or whatever, you can quickly move into the top of the ecosystem there, and then use your position in one market to start to bleed into another. So you can't get a large share of a large market until you have a large share of a small market. And make no mistake, going after, and this, we touched on this initially, going after too large a market puts you in competition with too many others that will compete away any existing leverage that you have, either as a member of a community, a member of a submarket, or a member of your own database and sphere. If you try to go too big too fast, you will ultimately end up competing away all of your profitability and distributing resources too thin. So the last, or not the last, but the next piece is what are the characteristics that we want to leverage, and really getting tactical here in terms of, hey, what do I do? What's next? What are the characteristics of a monopoly? And I think there is, I'm not going to remember the name of the play, but there's a play that opens with all happy families are alike, and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own special way. And so I think when it comes to building a successful real estate business and a successful monopoly, right? We're not going to treat that like a four-letter word. Is that all successful realtors have a lot in common, and all unsuccessful realtors are unsuccessful in very unique and special ways. And so that means that we are a company of models and systems, right? If you read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent and you do what it says to do, you will have success, right? And so this is not an alternative to, yes, that's the one. Thank you so much, Kaylee, Anna Kareninen. And that is, so we're a company of models and systems, and this is not meant to say that these all underpin the idea of what we're talking about. Remember, this is a framework to focus our time, energy, and resources. So when we look at we look at a monopoly, right? There are four things that drive a monopoly's success. One is proprietary technology. And again, from the framework of this book, that's going to be, hey, I was the first one to connect college kids, or we patented a safe way to transfer money electronically, like that sort of thing pushes forward and creates a monopoly. Now, for your proprietary technology, we could look at that in the headset of, what are the things that you know or are capable of or do that other people don't, right? Like, this is just unique value proposition, right? And that could be expertise, and that could be experience, and that could be relationship, but we have to understand what our unique value proposition is and exploit it. The second thing is network effects, right? And you've heard me talk on sales meetings before about Metcalfe's law. which is that the value of a network expands as more people enter it, right? So the example here is a fax machine, right? The first fax machine, completely useless, right? Because there's nobody else to fax. But every fax machine that got added into the world, right? The first fax machine became more valuable. And so you can look at your your database, right? Or look at your relationships, look at your past clients. The more you have of them, this is where network effects take place, right? The best way to get future business is to get past business, right? And that is to say that you have, you know, the more people you do business with, the more people you have opportunities to do business with, because now they're in your database. Now you're communicating to them. And this is really where referrals manifest themselves from our business model, is in the network effects of, I have more people that I've done business with. I have more people that trust me. I have more people that like me. I have more people that know me, and I have more people that I can talk to. And then there's economies of scale, right? So, you know, it's something as small as, I don't drive to Lorain County to do business because I own a farm here in Geauga County, or, you know, vice versa. All the way to, you know, if I can get 2 listings in the same neighborhood, I could probably get 5, right? Because I have concentrated my marketing efforts and my attention there. And then there's, you know, the last component is branding. And this is very much icing on the cake, and it's your outward communication of your unique value proposition and just the way that you build consistency in the mind of the consumer. We as human beings want to behave consistently, right? And so in our industry, you know, it could be just listed, just sold, marketing, you know, whether it's on Facebook, it's, you know, it is fundamentally signs and yards, right? If everybody I know lists with Eddie, then I'm going to list with Eddie too, because that's consistent with my community. So that branding component's there. And one really interesting and really fun thing that came up as a part of this read that I thought was, initially, you know, I kind of walked past it, and then as I came back to it, I thought, you know, that's a really powerful thing for us in this industry as realtors. And he talks a lot about the you know, in most environments, we want to talk about a first mover advantage, right? You know, especially when you start thinking about proprietary technology and development and unique value proposition, and it's like, who can be first? But this idea of being first is not nearly as important as being last, right? And that is, you want the last mover advantage. And the last mover advantage means that you're the last company left, right? And that's the total monopoly. But you could also approach it as being the last realtor in an area or in a community, or, you know, however you want to overlap your circles, you're going to be the last realtor that does that, right? It's like chess. We have to begin with the end game in mind, right? And the irony of a monopoly is that all of the value for most monopolies lie in the future, right? And I'm going to go to the whiteboard here for a second, because some of us may have seen this previously, but it is it's a great way. Oh, do I got to pin myself? Yes. It's a great way to think about the long-term value of your real estate business. And again, it's this concept that the longer you stay in business, the more your value is in the future. And so we know that we have dry erase markers that are dry. We know that we have let me see that all right. There's a line going up and down. Maybe I'll try a different color again. All right. So every 3 to 7 years is the national average. Oh my God. Can't find a good marker to save my life. Every 3 to 7 years, someone moves, right? And when someone moves, we have the opportunity to help them. what's interesting is that, we always talk about there are only 6 life events that drive a real estate transaction: birth, death, marriage, divorce, promotion, and demotion. And so on average, this is 3 to 7 years nationally. It's 8 to 10 in Northeast Ohio, if you take out the outlier of last year. And so we're in relationship and we're owning market all the way through until somebody has a home buying need. And then they're gonna buy or sell or invest in real estate. So let's start with buy. And so if we're gonna take our monopoly and we're gonna say we're gonna monopolize our database, we're gonna not monopolize our sphere. This is a transaction for a first-time home buyer that was referred to you by a former colleague. And it's $150,000 house, which means it's a $4,500 commission, right? Roughly speaking, probably 4,000 with the 3-2 split, right? So the $4,000 commission there. Now, in the next 3 to 7 years, this person's going to move, right? But as a past client, they stay inside of your database, they stay inside of your sphere, they stay inside of your monopoly, and now they have to. Let's say in 5 years, it's it's appreciated 10%. So now it's a $165,000 house that they have to sell, and they're going to sell that, and they're going to leverage the equity to buy a $200,000 house. So they're going to buy for $200K, they're going to sell at $165 and buy at $200. So let's say that's $365. That is going to be a roughly a little bit over a $10,000 commission there, right? Now fast forward the next timeline, right? This person stays in your sphere, they stay in your database, they are unaccessible to anybody else because of their relationship with you. You are their realtor. They are now going to sell a $225,000 house, and they're going to buy a $400,000 house, right? And so now I have an $18,000 roughly commission for that. And so the value in monopolizing a small market today, right, of any size or value, is that its value, invariably, especially in this industry, with the brief exceptions throughout history, will appreciate, and there will be more value in the future, right? Versus the idea that I've got to restart my business and I got to go find more business every year. If we effectively monopolize, and geography works the same way, right? If we can control not a super majority, but a large share of a specific subset geographically, then everything that moves in there, we get a piece of, right? And there will be highs and there will be lows, but it will always move, right? So the value is always in the future, and the value is always going up, right? And so this is why we hear Gary Keller and Jason Abrams and Jay Papasan talk about you can be anywhere you want in 5 years, right? Because in 5 years' time, even just selling 12 homes a year, right? You've got 60 homes sold now. And when you get to 5 years, the repeat business starts to fire. And that's not even to consider the referral business, right? Which are people that's a natural expansion concentrically of your monopoly, is when you take a client and they fall in love with you and you do great work, and you're going to be their realtor for life, and somebody else they know needs a realtor. And then that monopoly slowly expands as your database expands. So the things that specific to database, we're talking 36 touch campaign, which includes client events, different levels of communication, contacts, consistent contacts on a quarterly basis. Doing all those things as the way you do business then creates an opportunity for you to have a monopoly long term, right? If you had a monopoly of an entire geographic area today, right, in the day, it's not worth much. It's worth more as more life events happen. And so as we kind of come to a close here, I want to revisit, the most jarring line for me in the book was this idea that competition is for losers. And I've really fallen in love with that concept. And he summarizes it very well, is that we think of when we think of losers, well, first, let me caveat, like, competition will make you better, right? Like, the Olympics are a great example, right? Like, without competition, nobody is getting sub 10 seconds in the sprint, right? If the second fastest person can do 100 meters in 20 seconds, the fastest, doesn't have to be the first fastest, just the fastest person might only run it in 19, right? So competition does make us better, right? But it won't make you richer. It will not make you richer from a business standpoint, right? Going out and competing certainly benefits the customer in the long game, but it will not benefit you as the business owner. And so with that caveat in place, he uses this framework as we think of losers as the people who aren't fast enough, they aren't strong enough, they don't make the team, and we say that losers are the ones who can't compete. And his framework is losers are the ones that have to compete, right? The ones that have to go out and compete for business, the ones that have to compete away their profits, the ones who have neglected, right, the natural monopolies that exist or have not exploited the monopolies that have the potential to exist are the ones that we should be calling losers. And so, and I think the idea there is that we have by the nature of, and I'm looking at who's on this call, this is 100% true. By the nature of who we are, the way that we do business, our level of expertise, training, understanding, we are absolutely positively in a position where we could have the last mover advantage within a subset of the population that would support a very strong business, right? And so as I read this, I drew a ton of correlations to what we do here as a company, things like doing the database, marketing to it consistently, the idea of identifying your niche, whether it's farming, luxury, commercial, investment, first-time home buyers, right? And picking that as what you're going to get really, really, really good at to have a strong value proposition with. And then even to things like expansion, right? We as a company support expansion into other markets from this one, from any market into any market, right? With almost 900 Keller Williams offices nationwide or worldwide. The idea, though, is that you have to have a strong and dominant position in an existing market before expanding into another one. Now, that's a really easy concept for us to wrap our heads around as we think about going from, Northeast Ohio to, Portland, Maine, or Portland, Washington, right? But what if we took the same approach to, I want to secure a dominant position in my current environment or my current market, right? Before I go from the Heights to Geauga County, right? Or whatever small local comparison to take a bigger piece of a smaller pie. Is larger share in a smaller market will allow you to bully your way into other markets. So as I feel like I say every single month as we do these, we have, I would strongly recommend reading this book, but this is probably the most, it's probably the biggest reach in terms of, something I came across this book, I read it, just for entertainment. And I found so many strong correlations with what we do from an industry standpoint. It helped encourage and reframe, where are we looking for our inspiration? Where are we looking for our frameworks and our strategies? We've got great models and systems as a company, and those underpin everything that I'm talking about. But in terms of like getting excited and thinking maybe at a little bit of a different angle, things like this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel are really, really fantastic and exciting to think about. So that has been a lot of me talking, which is, depending on your position, maybe good, maybe bad, but love to open it up to any questions. Anyone want to drop anything in the chat box, any ahas, anything that you're like, hey, tell me more about that, or did he talk about this? What questions do you have? And if there are none, I'll just assume I crushed it. Everybody's jaws are on the floor. Except for Eddie, I can see yours is not, so it's okay. All right, guys. Well, as always, if you have questions, comments, concerns, smart remarks, or physical threats, and you don't want to share them in front of the group, I will hear them in private. And also, as we look ahead, there will not be one of these, I don't believe, in September because of the Labor Day holiday. However, we will be back on October, November, and December. So if there is a book that you have been wanting to read, or that somebody has recommended or you think would be really beneficial, and you can't find the time, energy, or resources to actually consume that, send it to me. We'll put it on the list and try and get it on the calendar as something that we can pull apart and really better understand how it can impact our real estate businesses and our lives. So if there are no parting shots, we will wish everyone a very happy Friday and get you out of here just a few minutes early today. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys and catching up soon.